Hi there everybody and welcome back to the channel. It's February now, so that means it's time to talk about Halloween Horror Nights speculation. We are looking to update our HHN speculation map for the month of February. There has been quite a few developments, so we want to talk about quite a few rumors, speculation that's out there that's worthwhile to mention for this month. So we're going to go ahead and get right into it, shall we? So one of the main things that we missed when we talked about speculation for the month of January was an HHN Nightmares speculation map that released in December for Christmas time that kind of gave us a hint at some properties that we can expect to see at Halloween Horror Nights in Hollywood this year. We missed that one last month, but I feel like it has a little bit more relevance this month, so it's definitely something that's worthwhile in mentioning this month when we talk about our overall Halloween Horror Nights speculation for the month of February. So that's something that we're going to be taking a look at today. In terms of Halloween Horror Nights speculation, HHN Nightmares has become a quite reliable source when it comes to predicting what we can expect to see at Halloween Horror Nights. They have released some speculation maps that are pretty indicative to what we can expect to see at Halloween Horror Nights. And it looks like this year they actually treated us to one in December with some Christmas hints as to what we can expect to see at Halloween Horror Nights. So we're going to start off our speculation for this month's Halloween Horror Nights speculation video here, pretty much breaking down what they hint at in their own speculation map in order to build our own speculation map for Halloween Horror Nights for the month of February, which is going to change from the month of January. So if you didn't watch the previous January video, we're going to kind of break down pretty quickly how we did speculation for this year. So it's basically, we're going to do our own speculation map, pretty much breaking down what we think each maze in each venue is going to be for Halloween Horror Nights. So we have our own speculation map point blank, and we're going to pretty much just guess what we think each property is at said venue for Halloween Horror Nights 2025. So we're going to update it as we did from the month of January. If you want to know what the month of January looked like in terms of speculation for us here on Thrill Seeker Network, you can feel free to take a look back at the prior video. If not, then we're going to go ahead and update it fresh here for February with the new developments that we have as far as everything we've heard in terms of Halloween Horror Nights 2025. So starting off, taking a look at the HHN Nightmare speculation map, there are a few properties that we can kind of cross-reference with our own speculation map from January. It just kind of adds fuel to the fire as to properties that we could assume that we are most likely going to see at Halloween Horror Nights this year. First and foremost, one of the properties that I think we are very, very likely to see at Halloween Horror Nights this year, as we talked about in the January speculation video, is one of the mazes over on the H slot section, which is the mazes that are under the Curious George parking lot where you have to walk through Wizarding World of Harry Potter to get through. That would be Terrifier. So again, this is the maze that we speculated on for January. Again, a lot of the same reasoning applies. It's such a huge property with a huge fan base that I think at this point it's kind of hard for Universal to ignore, especially after such a lackluster year as was the 2024 season. And it looks like HHN Nightmares in their speculation map are just kind of adding fuel to the fire as to Terrifier coming to Halloween Horror Nights 2024. So as we can see on their speculation map, they added the logo of a Santa beard onto their map for one of the H-slot mazes, and a Santa beard is significant for those who have seen Terrifier 3. You know that Art the Clown, he kind of goes into a bar and he finds the Santa lookalike, and he's really keen on Santa's beard. He wants to have Santa's beard to fully feel in the Christmas spirit in a sort of sense. Like he steals this fake Santa suit, but he wants the beard to really be a real Santa. So he takes the beard in like this really disturbing scene where he freezes the fake Santa with liquid nitrogen and takes the beard right off his face. And so that's one of the most like infamous and significant scenes in Terrifier 3. So again, this just really kind of hints to that. It kind of almost confirms it in a sort of sense that Terrifier is a property that Universal is taking a look at for Halloween Horror Nights for this year. And again, given the reasoning that we had for January, this is a property that makes perfect sense to show up at the event this year. And again, it just kind of adds fuel to the fire that Terrifier will indeed be one of the properties at Halloween Horror Nights 2025. So for February, we're going to start off our speculation map and place Terrifier as still one of the properties that we expect to see in the H-slot menu of Halloween Horror Nights for this year. Again, this is one that I just think makes perfect sense. It really fits overall with what Halloween Horror Nights might want to do this year. So without a doubt, I think this is a property that we can really, really bank on showing up at the event this year. So sticking on the H slot, we do have another hint as to what the other maze that's going to be located down there could be from the HHN Nightmare speculation map. So for the hint for this maze, we do have what looks like a shelf full of toys. Now we have like a toy rabbit in here, like a doll and stuff. And immediately people kind of thought this could be Megan. Megan is at the end of the day a toy. So a lot of people kind of put two and two together and said, well, if the hint is a toy, then this maze could be Megan. But I don't think it's as simple as that, but this hint does kind of correlate into something that makes a lot more sense. It would be a property that's pretty unique, pretty out there to see at the event, but it's one that, again, going based off of this hint, just fits in way too perfectly. And that would be a maze inspired by WWE, Bray Wyatt, and the Wyatt Six specifically. If we're taking a look at this now, the hint kind of shows us like this again, this cabinet full of toys. There's like a bunny in here, a doll. And for those of you familiar with WWE, and more specifically the character of Bray Wyatt, you know that he had this whole gimmick called the Firefly Funhouse. And in the Firefly Funhouse, the whole intro kind of had like a TV, like a children's television show kind of aesthetic. And in that, we saw a lot of those symbols that we see in this hint on the program. So like the bunny toy, the doll, all that stuff we saw in there. Now, Bray Wyatt was one of those characters similar to The Undertaker that kind of blended horror with WWE professional wrestling, and they kind of incorporated that whole theme into WWE. Now, WWE is not something that Universal is a stranger to. They actually did a base based off The Undertaker back in the 90s, where if you want to learn a little bit more about that, I would definitely recommend you watching the first episode in our Halloween Horror Nights documentary, The Hollowed Past, where we go a little bit more in depth on how that maze went. But yeah, it's definitely something that Universal has done before in the past. I think a lot of Monday Night Raw and some of the other wrestling programs film out in the sound stages at Universal Orlando, and a lot of the wrestlers are pretty well known to attend HHN over in Orlando. So this is definitely something that I do see Orlando really wanting to explore. And again, it just blends itself into a maze so well that I think Hollywood could borrow this as well and also incorporate a maze based off of this. Specifically, what comes to mind with this is, again, the character of Bray Wyatt, and there is this subsect from that character that spawned known as the Wyatt Six, which are like these really cool masked characters. Like a lot of their designs almost look like something Slipknot would wear. So they are very cool looking, and they would essentially blend in really well for a Halloween Horror Nights maze. This is something, again, that's kind of out there, not necessarily your run-of-the-mill property that you would expect to see at Halloween Horror Nights, but in the past couple of years, we have seen Universal take a couple risks and try stuff that's a little bit out there, that's not necessarily what you would expect to see at the event, as was the case with like the prior two Weekend Haunted attractions that we did, which ended up being, for the most part, pretty successful for Universal. So this is another one of those that's something a little bit different. It might be a little bit of a gamble, but it just makes perfect sense. And I think for right now, this is going to be the maze that will feature over on the H lot. Moving along to the upper lot, we do have two mazes with hints here. So the first one being Parisian Courtyard. Now, previously for our last speculation video, we said that the maze in the Parisian Courtyard would be a sequel to Monstros, which would round off the trilogy. And it looks like the hint on the speculation map all but confirms that. As we can tell by the hint, it has kind of like a weird shape, but once you zoom in to find out what this hint actually is, we can see that it looks like a piñata, which is, again, very common in Latin American culture. So it just kind of alludes to the fact, again, that we will be seeing the return of Monstros over in the Parisian Courtyard. Now, as to what, again, those monsters that will be featured in the haunted attraction this year are, it really doesn't give us any hints to go by. We can again speculate that maybe Chupacabra is going to be one big one that we haven't seen before, so that's probably going to be one of the ones that features. But as to the rest of them, we really don't know at this moment. What it does confirm, though, is that, again, this is going to be the maze that features in Parisian. Now, moving along to the UBE venue, this is where stuff gets a little bit interesting. Now, a lot of the speculation map, which was released around Christmas time, is Christmas themed. So it does have a lot of Christmas elements to it that I don't necessarily think tie into the overall hints. So we do see like a lot of characters like around Christmas trees or Christmas lights with Christmas hats. And that's the case for the hint with the UBE venue. So we have what looks like a ghost emoji holding up a set of string lights with the Santa hat. Now, I don't necessarily think that the Christmas elements have anything to do with the hint itself. I think the hint itself would be the ghost emoji, but maybe even taking a closer look at it, maybe even like the string lights that he's holding up. So as to what this could be, again, this is one that's pretty vague as far as what we can assume this hint relates to. Last time around when we talked about what we thought could be featured here, we kind of decided that it would either be a paranormal maze or something a little bit more lighthearted, and we ended up saying that this could be Beetlejuice. And again, going based off of this, you do have the ghost, which could allude to something paranormal, some kind of ghost, but it does seem a little bit more kind-hearted in nature by just going based off that it is an emoji after all. And again, just the hint of him holding the string lights, a ghost with string lights, that just gives me Beetlejuice vibes. So we're just going to go ahead and keep that again as the maze for the UVE venue. Again, this is one that I'm not really at all sure of, and again, this hint really doesn't confirm or deny that. So for the time being, we're just going to keep that maze as Beetlejuice over on the UVE venue, and we will see how this progresses pretty much throughout speculation season. But again, I do think Beetlejuice does have a fair chance of showing up at the event this year, and if it does end up being the maze over on the UVE venue, I would not be surprised at all. Before we move down to the lower lot of the park, the map also does give us a couple hints as to some scare zones and some shows that we can expect to see this year at the event. First off, over by Waterworld, we have a jet ski, which could hint at the return of the Purge Dangerous Waters, which has been featured there for the last 2 years. Very successful show. People really seem to like it. It draws in a fair amount of people. It's a pretty cool show overall. And again, it just makes sense of it returning to the event. Why fix what's not broken? It's a really good crowd eater, and it's just fun overall, so it's definitely one that I think could come back to the event this year. Now, over on the DreamWorks Theater, we have a hint to something that could be a little bit more exciting. Last time around, we speculated that Nosferatu could be one of the mazes coming to Halloween Horror Nights, but this speculation map kind of alludes to the fact that Nosferatu and Count Orlok will be present at Halloween Horror Nights, but not necessarily in a maze. So the emoji for this is actually a hand that's kind of creeping over towards a cookie. And again, the cookie is kind of like the whole Christmas theme. It's like Santa's cookies and whatnot, but the hand silhouette is really reminiscent of that hand silhouette that Nosferatu is quite known for in the original film. The remake, they kind of play into that a little bit more, and it has a little bit more significance. So this could hint to a Nosferatu show, or more specifically, maybe something related around Focus Features, which is one of the subsidiaries of Universal, who has worked on films like Nosferatu and Lisa Frankenstein from last year. So this could be something similar to the Blumhouse show that we did a couple years ago, where they kind of showcased some of those films. It could just be a Nosferatu thing altogether. I mean, the whole thing could just be like Count Orlok guiding you into some sort of weird, I don't know, but it's kind of hints at that. So, and with that, we also have our first hint for a scare zone for this year, which is right over in the area in front of the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, which was a new zone area that we saw last year. And the hint for this one is an ornament featuring a crow, which pretty much all but confirms the return of the Murder of Crows scare zone, one that we saw last year, which was very popular with the huge still walking crows and the baby crow animatronic, which was very cool. So again, this is just another one that makes perfect sense coming back to the event, and it looks like this all but confirms it. So moving down to the lower lot, this is where stuff gets really interesting, honestly, as far as the speculation map. Now, not everything has been given hints. At this time, there are a couple slots, as we saw with the Terror Tram and the 2 soundstage mazes, which have empty Christmas present boxes with question marks on them. So based on those mazes, we're really in the dark here, but there are a couple down here that do have some hints, so we're going to start off with those. So starting off in the T-Pad, which we saw last year host Texas Chainsaw Massacre, our hint is a Santa Claus holding a bag of popcorn hiding behind a Christmas tree. Now again, last time around we talked about how it is very possible again that Universal features an original maze based off an original property that had been previously featured in Orlando, as was the case last year with Dead Exposure. Last time around we speculated that Nightingales could be the property that we see at the event, but we also kind of mentioned names out there like Slaughter Cinema and Graveyard Games. And if we're going based on this hint, this alludes to the fact that this might be the case, and it hints at a Slaughter Cinema maze. Now, Slaughter Cinema is a concept that Universal Orlando has done twice, and it centers around a drive-in movie theater, where it's essentially a vignette of a bunch of Grindhouse-esque horror films, and they're all original ideas, actually. And a lot of the concepts are pretty out there, pretty reminiscent of like 70s Grindhouse-esque movies, and this is one, again, that I do think fits Hollywood style very well. Hollywood is no stranger to the vignette kind of maze, stuff like Holidays in Hell, which we featured before in the past, even the Monstros mazes, which are all essentially vignette-esque mazes. So this is one, again, that I do see John Murdy being very interested in doing. And with that, he could even borrow some of the films that Orlando did, or even come up with his own kind of ideas, kind of like he did with Dead Exposure last year, where it was based off an Orlando property, but he put his own spin on it. And Slaughter Cinema is one that he could easily put his own spin on things, go as wild as he wants. And it's one that it could be a lot of fun, honestly. This is one that a lot of people have been asking to see in Hollywood, and it looks like, given based off of the speculation map, that actually might be the case this year. So for the T-Pad maze, we're going to speculate that Slaughter Cinema is going to be coming to Halloween Horror Nights this year in Hollywood. Now moving over to the Mummy venue, now this is where stuff gets really interesting. So the hint for this is a rocking horse. Now, a lot of people originally speculated that this could be The Last of Us. Last video we talked about how we were pretty much certain that The Last of Us would be coming to Halloween Horror Nights this year. But given this, it doesn't actually seem to be the case now. So this hint, again, people at first thought it was The Last of Us. There's a lot of horses in The Last of Us, but not necessarily anything that we can kind of connect a rocking horse to. But there is a property which was pretty big that was rumored to actually come to Halloween Horror Nights last year, which is similar to The Last of Us, where it's a video game turned television series. And again, this hint could be alluding to that, and that is, of course, Fallout. Now, Fallout is a video game series that centers around a post-apocalyptic landscape. It's very comedic in tone, but it does have some horror elements in there. There's a lot of zombies and mutated creatures and whatnot. And last year, Amazon actually developed a television series based on the video games, and it was actually very successful, very popular. I know they're currently working on a season 2. Now, with that, this could be one that Universal does like to tackle this year. This was rumored for Halloween Horror Nights last year. Last year, when construction started and everybody saw the facade for that exposure, everybody thought it was a Fallout maze, that it could be one of the vaults from the game. Now, this could be the year that we do see Fallout, and again, this hint kind of alludes to that. There is a rocking horse in the Fallout video games. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but it is something that, like a collectible or something that you can collect in the game. So it does have a little bit of a connection there, a little bit more of a connection to this and The Last of Us with this hint. And again, this is one that just fits really well in the Mummy venue. It does have some horror elements. It could be the lighthearted comedy house of the year. This is something that Universal has been keen on doing the past couple years. So I do see this trend continuing, and this property just fits perfectly. It's one that's very well recognizable. They have the opportunity to do pretty much cross promotion with other merchandise. I can already see Fallout merchandise all over the park. You could do a Fallout food booth downstairs, sell Nuka-Cola, all that stuff, which would really, again, bring in a lot of crowds, bring in the people who are really interested in the games, and the people who like the show overall, like I did myself. So it is one that I do think has a very strong chance of coming to the event, and it would, with that, cancel out any hopes of The Last of Us coming to Halloween Horror Nights. Not necessarily that I don't think we'll see 2 video games on Halloween Horror Nights, because I do think that still might be the case this year. It's just that I think they're very similar in nature. They both center around an apocalyptic landscape, and we all know John Murdy does not like to feature mazes that are too similar in the same year, as was famously the case in 2013 when he didn't feature Cabin of the Woods at the event because we had an Evil Dead maze. Correlation there, I don't understand, but it's his logic, and going based off of that, I will say that it's either one or the other, and based off of this, it looks like Fallout is going to be the maze that features in the Mummy venue for Halloween Horror Nights 2025. Now, for the 2 soundstage mazes, we don't have a hint for them at this moment. They are both anonymous, Christmas presents on the map. And so, based off of what we speculated last time around, we did say that we could expect to see Nosferatu on one of the soundstages, Soundstage 15 in particular, where we saw the Universal Monsters maze feature last year. Now, given that we think Nosferatu might feature in one of the shows this year, do we think that kind of eliminates the possibility of it being a maze? It's interesting. I don't think that could necessarily be the case entirely. I still think that there is a little bit of correlation there, and that you could have a maze and a show in the same year, pretty much based on the same property. I don't think that would affect the chances of it becoming a maze, and overall, I think it works better overall as a maze. It is, again, a film that was very popular. It was distributed by Universal and Focus Features, which is under Universal, so it should be one that's pretty easy to secure. So at this time, I still think that Nosferatu will indeed be the maze that features in this section of the park. Like we said last time around, this is not one that I'm 100% confident that we will see at the event. It is one that still has a fairly good shot at showing up in the lineup, and I know a lot of people recently have been pushing it a lot too. They do want to see this as a maze at Halloween Horror Nights. And given the absence of the Universal Monsters like we talked about last time around, I think that would plug that hole in pretty nicely. And it would just be very fun overall. I would really love to see it. So we're going to keep that as a maze for Soundstage 15 for now. But again, this could change as speculation season goes on. Now the last maze, which would be over on Soundstage 22, is tricky. Now between this, I'm torn between 3 different properties essentially. Last time around, we talked about the possibility of us having a Horrors of Blumhouse maze again that would feature both Megan and The Black Phone, which are both having new films come out this year. I still do think that could be an option, and it is something that we could see in the lineup and could be the last property, but I just have a hard time believing that this would take up one of the sound stages. I think it's a maze concept that would necessarily warrant it being in a soundstage, so I really have a hard time believing that the Horrors of Blumhouse would still be coming to Halloween Horror Nights. It would really feel kind of weird, to not feature Megan or the Grabber from The Black Phone at all at Halloween Horror Nights, especially given how big of a presence they had last year without their films even being released. And with both of their films being released this year under Blumhouse, it would feel kind of weird. But I really don't see this being in a soundstage. I really don't see it taking up one of the two biggest venues at Halloween Horror Nights. And if it does, I think that would feel a little bit unfortunate in my opinion, but it is a possibility. Now, another viable option that we discussed about last time around was the possibility of Silent Hill coming back to the event. And again, I do think that it's still a strong contender for something that we could see. And it is something that would fit the soundstage a little bit better, in my opinion, than something like Blumhouse. And it is one that would make sense to feature here. Like we talked about last time around, pretty much going through all the bullet points. The second game had a remake last year, which was very successful. We are having a film based on Silent Hill 2, which would again just keep the property in loop, keep it popular. There are talks about there being more remakes to some of the earlier games in Silent Hill, so the property is hot right now. Pyramid Head is a very recognizable character that again would pretty much headline the event. You'd see him on all the merch, you'd see him on all the billboards and everything, so it is one that I do still think has a fair shot of showing up to the event. But now doing a little bit more digging onto stuff that's coming out in 2025 this year, since we know Universal loves to cross-promote and promote things that are popular in the year. And it could be one of these properties that feature at Halloween Horror Nights. So we always have to take a look at pretty much anything that's upcoming. There are a couple of big things that are, again, contenders for the event. We have a new season of Stranger Things coming out, but I don't believe that's out until November. So I do have a really hard time seeing this at the event this year, especially with the Stranger Things property being attached to Six Flags at the current moment. Again, same thing with Saw. There's supposed to be a new entry in the Saw franchise this year, but again, that's another property that's been tied up in Six Flags for the last couple years, and then it's not one that I see them letting go of anytime soon. Another viable option that I actually have not seen a lot of people talk about, which could be a pretty big deal as far as something that we could see at Halloween Horror Nights, is similar to Silent Hill. It's a video game that is being turned into a film this year, and that is none other than Until Dawn. Now, Until Dawn was a game that released a couple years ago that was really popular. It kind of played with the whole idea of like the pick your own adventure kind of games, and it was really fun overall. I remember really liking the game when it came out, and it looks like this year we're actually getting a film based off the video game. It's distributed by Sony, which we do know we have a close relationship with Sony. We feature a lot of different Sony projects in the past couple years, such as Ghostbusters last year. And it is a film that is being directed by David F. Sandberg, who, for those of you guys who aren't familiar with his work, he did the second Annabelle film, Annabelle Creation, which I think is the superior Annabelle film. And most recently, he did the Shazam films for Warner Brothers as well. Now, this film already has a trailer out, and it's getting quite a little bit of backlash, given that it's not at all like the game, but it does seem to be pretty fun. And going based off the trailer alone, there does seem to be a lot of sets, a lot of characters that we could easily recreate at a Halloween Horror Nights maze, and it is one that would fit a soundstage very well, given that we would need that controlled environment. It takes place during the snow. You could do some really cool effects, kind of control the temperature and everything. It's one that makes perfect sense, and I think given the popularity of the game and given that the film is coming out, it would just increase the popularity of it overall. I do think this is an option for something that we could see at the event. It's something that, again, they could promote for this year, cross-promote with Sony, kind of like they did with Ghostbusters last year. So it is a very good option. Now, I don't think the controversy would affect this at all. Really, I know it's not necessarily like the game. It's not necessarily what fans wanted to see, people who were fans of the Until Dawn video game. It's not necessarily what they wanted to see in a film. But I actually really do have faith in director David F. Sandberg, who again has done some really good horror films and has really proven himself as a name out there in the horror genre. You know, he did Lights Out, Annabelle Creation, both which are really tight, very well executed horror films. And I do think the movie itself has potential to be really great, even though it's nothing like the video game. So with that, it is something that I think once the film comes out, people who haven't played the game or just casual moviegoers will really enjoy. So it is one that I do see being at Halloween Horror Nights, and I do see quite a lot of people being interested in it. So for the time being, it really is pretty much a toss-up between this and Silent Hill. Again, they're both really similar properties. I do think Silent Hill is a little bit more recognizable to general audiences. People can recognize Pyramid Head right away. He's a very recognizable character. Nothing from the Until Dawn franchise really holds up a candle to that. But I do think, given again how big this film is expected to be, I do see this as the maze in Soundstage 22, in that big soundstage. It just makes perfect sense with the settings and the effects and everything you would have to do for a maze like this to go in a soundstage. So for the time being, right now in February, I will say that the maze in Soundstage 22 is going to be Until Dawn. Now, a little bit of a bonus discussion. You know, we don't have a hint for the Terror Tram, and I really haven't seen anybody talk about the Terror Tram at all this year now, but we could kind of speculate onto some things that we could see. in the Terror Tram. I know immediately a lot of people would think of Blumhouse. If Blumhouse won't feature as a haunted attraction this year, it could be something that, again, takes over the Terror Tram, kind of like we saw last year. But I do think it's a little too similar to that. We have had years where the Terror Tram kind of carries over year after year and it ends up being pretty much the same theme, but just updated a little bit differently, as was famously done during the Walking Dead era, where we had a Walking Dead Terror Tram 3 years in a row, really, and it just kind of changed little by little depending on which season we were on. We could see this again with Blumhouse. This could be the case where it is, again, a Horrors of Blumhouse Terror Tram, but with updated sets. You have scenes from the second Megan film, scenes from the Black Phone 2, maybe even throwing a couple of new Blumhouse films with the Wolfman, which was supposed to feature last year but didn't. You could add that this year. So this really could be that, but again, I really don't see this coming back in this format year after year. At least I hope it wouldn't, but it is an option. Another idea for the Terror Tram would be something that I have seen a few people discussing early on as an idea for a maze, and that would be something, again, that's a little bit kind of out there, not necessarily what you would expect to see at Halloween Horror Nights, but this would be a concept based around a haunted house that Jimmy Fallon did last year in New York City called the Tonightmares. Now, the Tonightmares was a vignette-style haunted house that featured a lot of different scenes from Jimmy Fallon's show throughout the years, kind of developed into full-blown horror concepts. It was an interesting haunted attraction for sure. If you didn't get a chance to check it out, I would definitely recommend watching the videos on that. It's actually not as bad as it sounds. I know the concept itself sounds pretty goofy overall, but it actually seemed pretty cool and very well executed. Now, this is one that, again, people were speculating could come to Halloween Horror Nights as a maze, given that Universal does have a very close connection with Jimmy Fallon. He is the host of the studio tour for Hollywood, and in Orlando, he has his own ride, actually. So it is one, again, that makes sense. His show is produced by NBC Universal. So it just makes sense as to something that we could see at the event. And I think this fits a little bit more in tune with the Terror Tram overall. Again, he's already the host of the studio tour during the day, so it just kind of makes sense to carry that over to the nighttime Terror Tram. You have all the vignettes kind of laid out throughout the path, and it would just make for a very interesting Terror Tram experience overall. It would be very comedic in nature, similar to what we had with Exterminators, where it has like that dark comedy kind of vibe, and it would fit pretty well. I think this is a concept that would work pretty well here, and overall, I would just be curious to see what they would do with it. I think it's a concept, again, that could be fun. I'm curious overall to see how this would go. And with that, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Thanks so much for everybody who watched my last video, who watched this video. Really appreciate it. Like I said, we will be trying to do these month after month. If anything else comes up speculation-wise, pretty big or worthwhile, we might make another video in between that as well, too. Just trying to stay in loop pretty much and keep everybody updated on everything that's going on in terms of Halloween Horror Nights speculation. So yeah, once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe. It does help us keep this channel in loop. Please be sure to comment down below on what you think we could see at the event this year. Any ideas on stuff that I didn't mention, anything that I did mention that you guys might want to chime in about, feel free to let me know. But yeah, thanks again so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.